The subject for the new oratorio would be the Messiah. In late August, Handel picked up his pen and began composing what would become a 260-page score. But not without a struggle. Suffering from rheumatism, the paralyzing effects of a stroke, and the psychological burden of enormous personal debt, Handel wrote. Day by day, note by note, he depicted a Messiah who would bear the griefs and sorrows of all people everywhere, including his own.
Surely, surely,
"24 days later, Messiah was completed. By the following April, the new score had been copied, rehearsed, and made ready for a premiere in Dublin, Ireland. It was a charity performance intended to raise money for people towards whom Handel must have felt particular compassion, those who were hopelessly in debt and incarcerated in debtor's prison. As the tenor soloist stood to sing the first words of the new oratorio, he seemed to be speaking directly to the prisoners and their families.
Comfort ye. Comfort ye, my people. Saith your God, saith your God.
A review of the first performance appeared in the Dublin Journal. Words are wanting to express the exquisite delight it afforded to the admiring, crowded audience. The sublime, the grand, and the tender, adapted to the most elevated, majestic, and moving words, conspired to transport and charm the ravished heart and ear. Not only was the oratorio a success, it accomplished its charitable purpose. When the revenue was collected and counted against the debts of the impoverished, 142 prisoners were liberated. Because of that first performance of Messiah, a price had been paid. Prison gates were opened, and the heads of the poor were lifted up in rejoicing. For them, the glory of the Lord had truly been revealed. But success was short-lived. Though Messiah was praised in Dublin, it was roundly rejected in London. in part because it was presented at the Opera House at Covent Garden. The weekly Universal Spectator summed up the general criticism. An oratorio either is an act of religion or it is not. If it is, then I ask if the playhouse is a fit temple to perform it in, or a company of players fit ministers of God's words. So, for years, the oratorio was largely ignored. But then, Handel arranged for another charity performance, supporting a cause that was familiar to Londoners. And everything changed. Every day, for many years, destitute women had streamed into the city seeking work as domestic servants. In their desperate state, they were preyed upon by unscrupulous employers, and then, if found to be with child, were callously dismissed by the very men who had used them. Virtually all women who bore children out of wedlock were shunned by society. As a result, each year, hundreds of newborns were abandoned, or worse. As the writer Daniel Defoe observed, those who cannot be so hard-hearted to murder their own offspring themselves get it done by others, by leaving them to be starved by parish nurses. The biblical description of Christ was appropriate for these suffering women and children.
He was despised, despised and rejected, rejected of men, a man of sorrows, a man of sorrows, and acquainted with grief, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief.
Sometime in the 1720s, a retired English shipwright named Thomas Coram had observed the plight of these women and their babies and began raising money for a foundling hospital. The purpose of the institution was to adopt the fatherless infants and raise them to lead meaningful lives. After many years, the new hospital opened its gates under cover of night. More children were brought forward than could possibly be accommodated. Yet the hospital chapel was still unfinished, and the General Committee had depleted its funds. But Handel, being no stranger to charitable work, made a proposal. As noted in the record, Mr. Handel generously and charitably offered a performance of vocal and instrumental music, and the money arising therefrom should be applied to finishing the hospital chapel. And so it was. On the 1st of May, 1750, Messiah was performed in the unfinished chapel, a suitable place for a sacred drama, and proceeds from the concert were used to complete the edifice. And there, in that refuge for the newborn child, Handel helped to bring to life the story of the Messiah in a most unusual way. Every nursery became a stable, and every cradle a manger, welcoming hope into the world. The words of Messiah were literally fulfilled. The Good Shepherd had gently led those who were with young.
He shall feed his flock like a shepherd, and he shall gather the lambs with his arm, and carry them in his bosom, and gently lead those that are with young, and gently lead, and gently lead those that are with young.
Jesus said, "By their fruits ye shall know them." The fruits of Handel's Messiah were real and abundant. Freed debtors, liberated mothers, rescued children. Handel hadn't simply told the story of the Messiah, the Redeemer. He had actually helped to do the Messiah's work, to succor God's children and save them from spiritual death. For each of these precious souls, the Redeemer lived. When George Friedrich Handel set down his pen in mid-September 1741, he could not have imagined how influential Messiah would become. 18 years later, a few days after hearing a performance of Messiah, Handel died. But his music did not. Today, his body of work is performed around the world, and yet none of it more frequently or more universally than Messiah. There are many reasons for its success, but perhaps, as the Bible explains, the greatest of these is charity. To feed the hungry, clothe the naked, liberate the captive, administer relief to the sick and the afflicted, and minister to every needy soul.